Okay, good afternoon everybody. Thank you ever so much for joining us at our debate this afternoon. I'm speaking on behalf of Professor Darrell O'Connor, our first speaker, who unfortunately has been delayed due to fatality on the train line, but he should be with us by 3 o'clock and we'll be speaking immediately after the tea break. So we've got a slight change in the order of our event today, so we'll be starting off with, actually was intended to be our last speaker, Graf from Wiley, and then we'll be proceeding through, as planned, as I say, apart from with Professor O'Connor speaking immediately after the tea break, and then the rest of the event will proceed as originally planned. Two things I would like to draw your attention to. The first is that we are looking for audience engagement in the event, and to facilitate this, we've set up a debate platform on Slido, which is available on www.sli.do, and the event code is 7637. What I'd like you all to do is, if you do have an electronic device, a phone or a tablet, if you can take it out and log on to the event and then post any questions that you have that we'll then use to inform the debate at the end of the sessions, that would be fantastic. And I think, Andy, you've also set up a poll on Slido that also you'd like the audience to complete presumably before your talk. So that would be great. The other is, if you are using social media, if you can use the hashtag PsychDebate2, that would be fantastic. And I hope you enjoy the event this afternoon and the wine reception afterwards. Thank you very much. Chris, if you'd like to kick off for us.
Hello. Thanks for having me. It's really nice to be here. It's a bit daunting to move from the end of the programme to the very start. So I'm happy to be doing it though. My name's Graf. I'm a long-time publisher. I left Sheffield University with a degree in chemistry, knowing that blowing up the lab one too many times meant that I should do absolutely anything else, and started working in publishing pretty much 20 years ago. And since then, well, it kind of stuck. And that's nice. So now I work at a company called Wiley, which BPS contracts to publish the BPS journals, and we're very happy about that. I guess that is why I'm here. My job at Wiley was until May last year kind of my hobby. It says here, Chris Graf volunteers for COPE, the Committee on Publication Ethics. I'm the co-chair of COPE, which is a charity and a membership organisation that promotes integrity in research and its publication. And until kind of May last year, that was a kind of hobby for me at Wiley. But in May, it became my full-time job at Wiley. So now I am the Director for Research Integrity and Publishing Ethics at Wiley, which is kind of great when your hobby becomes your job, right? That's me. This is what I'm going to share with you today. 3 things that publishers can do to help support integrity in research and the way it's published. And I'll tell you a bit about, it's kind of obvious, right? The 3 things are to listen to everybody who we serve, the communities for whom we publish, and actually not just listen, but understand what those communities are telling us. And then to react to that, so to support actively the things that those communities need for us to do to deliver the kinds of quality of service, but also quality of research publishing that we deliver for those communities. And last of all, I'm going to suggest that at the heart of being a research publisher is collaboration. Research publishers probably would be wise to remember that publishing research is not doing research. Publishing research is an important part of the things that you do when you do research, part of the communication of research, but there's a lot more to it. And that means that we must always collaborate. So let's take those 3 fairly abstract, perhaps anodyne things and try and make them real for you. Start by listening and understanding. We're going to talk about zombie apocalypse. We're going to talk about cutting each other some slack. And we're going to talk about making things simple for authors. The first of those is from a gentleman called Schmidt. who apparently is a voice for the voiceless in the replication crisis. All right, and on his blog, which there is the link if you'd like to read it, you can, he suggests that total vaporization of the Earth by an exploding sun would solve the replication crisis, and then goes to suggest that other things like zombies, deep impact, demons, and just ignoring this thing called the replication crisis would also be a solution. Well, thank you very much, John. That's not very helpful. Really, not very helpful. Perhaps what it does tell us is that it's a complicated thing, this thing called the replication crisis, and that there isn't going to be any one simple, single solution. That's about the only thing that's useful about what John has shared there, I think. Oh, and the picture, that's the Crab Nebula from the 1054 supernova, and it's from the Hubble spacecraft. Kind of cool, hey? So that's John Schmidt. Next up is Jeff Leake. If we're listening to people, Jeff Leake has a blog called Simply Statistics, and he says lots of sensible things on that blog. One of his posts from probably 2 months ago was 8 things that we could do to reduce the stress around reproducibility. And the 8th of those things is to cut each other some slack. Okay, it's quite stressful. There's 7 other things I could read out for you. I will. We need to define what we mean by reproduce and what we mean by replicate. There are various definitions out there, but I bet we all get confused with them. I do. We need to remember that replication is statistical and not deterministic. And I think what that means is that, you know, if you're doing an experiment and your result is determined by probability, then it's, guess what? It's determined by probability and statistics. And a different experiment also determining its results by probability may disagree with you. And he goes through a number of other things as well, which are quite useful and quite calm, actually, and a mature view of what we're doing here. So I like Jeff Leake. Good on you, Jeff. You're not here, are you? No? Okay. The third person who is listening and telling publishers things that are useful is Sally Ramsay. Sally leads open access and data publishing at Oxford's Bodleian Libraries. There she is. She visited us at Wiley a couple of weeks ago and gave us her wish list of things that would make research communication better. Her slides are available at that link, and also her answers to 3 questions are available at that link. But one of the take-homes is that everything is too hard for researchers. Right, complying with funder mandates and, you know, copyright mandates, and now thinking about open research and how to publish or make your data available and how to, you know, cite it when you want to cite it. This is all pretty complex, and something that we could all do to help would be to try and make that as simple as possible for everybody involved. So that's some listening, right? But it's no good listening if you don't then go and act upon what you've learned. So I'm suggesting that publishers need to both listen and understand and then act. Act upon what they've learned. And what I think the ways that publishers should act should be built around supporting quality and supporting the things that communities like the psychology community, but like all of those for whom we publish, supporting what those communities actually want and need. So let's think about that a bit. When I got my new job at Wiley, I asked everybody at Wiley what was top of their mind. Top of their mind as an integrity issue. And 37 good colleagues replied out of about a couple of thousand. You know, that's all right by me. But they said, when I read, maybe those of you who are researchers do this a lot, but when I read those 37 responses, I categorized the information that they shared with me and sort of put it into different catch-alls, which, you know, there's no hierarchy, there's no science to those catch-alls, but whenever anyone mentioned reproducibility, I counted that as a 1. And whenever anyone mentioned data publication, I counted that as a 1. And these are the top 5, all right? Image manipulation, authorship and credit, plagiarism, reproducibility, and data publication. And clearly, we're here to think about reproducibility today. But I thought it might be handy if I showed you some of the things that other disciplines are concerned with. Right? So we're going to flip over to the other end of the picture and look at image manipulation. So it's time for some audience participation. Woo! Who knows what that is? Who wants to shout out what that is? Be brave.
Western blot.
Western blot, yes! Okay then. Western blots are data, right? People think about data often as being numbers in a spreadsheet or in some other R package, right? No, it's not a data housing place, is it? It's a software that crunches data. Anyway, people think about data as numbers often, but these images are actually data. And there is a temptation to make them look prettier because journals want things that are pretty, right, to publish because they're illustrations. No, these are data. There is also a temptation to make stuff up because you can with numbers, but you can also with pictures as well. So if you look more carefully at this image, I don't know if you can see it, but there's an artifact in the image, a straight line there. Can you see that? And what has happened is the researcher has copied and pasted the image, right? So that's data fabrication. That's research fraud, right? It's in the control line, not the results line or the experimental line. So perhaps that's not so bad. And perhaps the blots are present beneath those pasted blots, and the thing that the researcher was doing was, making it look nicer because the blots weren't very intense. Or perhaps they weren't there at all. I don't know. You can't tell. But you can tell it's been manipulated. So these are some of the things that we're dealing with, or an example of the kinds of things that we're dealing with outside of psychology that may or may not be part of your world, probably aren't part of your world. And it's a data problem, right? That image is data. Here's another data problem. My good colleagues in the Weinheim part of Wiley that does some of the world's best chemistry publishing tell me that half of all the carbon-13 NMR data that are published, contain errors. Right? They might be sort of transcription errors where the readout from a spectrometer has been typed incorrectly into an interpretation program, or they might be, something else. Right? But either way, the data do not match what the actual structure that the spectroscopy is indicating is present. The structure is wrong. Okay? So maybe we can do things with images, and maybe we can do things with carbon-13 NMR to sort of validate data in new ways. And that will be actively listening and responding to the things that we're hearing from the community. So here's a solution. This is not an ad, okay? This is not a service that people can buy. It's a service that people can use for free. It's something that Wiley has where you plug into that website the readout from your spectrometry and the proposed structure, and then with clever, it's not really AI, with a whole bunch of algorithms, the software tells you whether your proposed structure matches what the world of chemistry tells you it ought to be. I mean, that's pretty good. That's validating NMR data. It also gives you, as a researcher, a certificate that you can include in your submission package to say, my data are good per this piece of software. So please, editor, look favourably upon my data. Pretty cool, right? Maybe data validation is something that we could improve to help with the whole replication thing. What about methods? Who's heard of registered reports? Probably about half of you. Okay. So outside are a couple of posters. They look a bit like this. That's good, isn't it? Because it's tiny. But it looks a bit like that. Go and check them out. So this is Daryl, who should be here, talking about an innovation at the Journal of Neuropsychology, edited by Martin Edwards. Is Martin here? No. In December, Martin and Daryl launched registered reports at the Journal of Neuropsychology. And registered reports are a way to test the methods and validate the methods for a researcher prior to that researcher embarking upon the actual experiment. So the journal will review your methods, give you feedback, and if you address the feedback properly, the peer review feedback properly, and then go and conduct the experiment, they will give you an in-principle acceptance. So no matter what your results, they will publish your work because the methods are sound. So you can find out more about that at the booth out there. So there you go. I've talked about listening to what's going on out there, and talked about responding to the things that we can do at publishers to help. The last thing that I said that I would talk about was collaborating. So I think I said that publishing research isn't doing research, and that publishers should remember that. Actually, everybody should remember that. I think we're all a little bit fixated on getting a paper out, right? And that's all great, but really it's not doing the research, is it? And so publishers need to remember that in particular, because we're part of a whole process. And that means that collaborating with those involved with the research process is super important, in fact, essential at all times. It's important to remember that we don't call the shots, but it does make it important for us to try and lead change in positive directions as well. And I'm going to give you the next slide, which is an example of collaboration, but it's also an invitation to you all to get involved with something that's going on right now and to join that collaboration. So who's heard of the Centre for Open Science? Like, again, about half of you. Terrific. Look them up. Maybe 2 years ago, 2015, 3 years ago, chaired by the Centre for Open Science, a set of guidelines called the TOP guidelines, Transparency, Openness and Promotion. It's quite a clumsy acronym, but anyway, the TOP guidelines were published in the famous journal called Science, under a wrapper called Promoting Open Research Culture, with Brian Nosek as the first author, who I think spoke here the last time this event happened. And they're great, right? Thousands of journals and publishers and people and organizations have signed up to endorse the TOP guidelines, which lay out ways to be transparent, 8 standards and 3 levels of transparency. I mean, they're kind of great, right? Loads of people signed up, but then it was hard for anybody to actually use them. All right, so implementing the TOP guidelines is a challenge. A group of us, including researchers, including research funders, including representatives from research institutions, including publishers, and other people that you would label stakeholders, arrived in Charlottesville back in September at the Centre for Open Science, and our mission was to work out how to implement the TOP guidelines, so that people didn't just sign up to them, so that they were actually able to use them and make their data available more easily, make their methods more clearly described and available more easily, and in longer form than perhaps a journal article might be able to do that, and so on. And here they are. Well, I'm not going to show you them now. Here they are in a link, right? A draft version of TOP Part 2, which is all about implementing TOP Part 1. It's not a new version of TOP, it's how to implement TOP. And if you like, it's there in a Google Doc for you to go and have a look at and have comment upon. So please do that. That's an example of publishers joining in collaborations. It's also, like I said, an invitation to everybody here to collaborate as well. And I'll leave you with a quote from one of my favourite people, Ginny Barber. Ginny was the chair of COPE before I became the co-chair of COPE. Here she is. She used to work at the Public Library of Science, and now she's in Australia doing other open access things. And at a COPE seminar in Tokyo maybe 3 years ago, she said, we need a culture of responsibility for the integrity of the literature. It's not just the job of editors. And my take on that is it's not just the job of any one of us or any one group of us. It's something that we all need to be pretty obsessed with and to do what we're doing here today, working out ways to make the research literature exhibit perhaps more integrity. And that's where I'll leave you. Thank you very much indeed.